and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today our video will be a countdown of the top champions for ranked play in patch 11.9. We'll be looking at the top carries, frontliners, and utility champions in the current meta. Keep in mind that there was a B patch for 11.9 that has shifted the meta balance a bit. Thus, we suggest taking our top 10 with a grain of salt as the meta continues to settle. With all that said, let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. At the top of our list today, we have Ziggs coming in at number 10. There are a lot of solid one-cost champions in the current meta and set 5 as a whole. Gragas, Kha'Zix, and the other Hellions besides Ziggs and a few other champions are all viable in the early game. But Ziggs stands above the rest even after being nerfed in the B patch. Honestly, prior to the B patch, Ziggs would have been further down the list, somewhere around probably 4th or 5th. The reason? He's the best one-cost item holder by far. Of course, he did lose some value because his attack speed went from 0.85 to 0.75, but even at 0.75, he's still much faster than most other champions. And since he's a Hellion, he'll gain additional attack speed when you have the trait active, which you likely will because Hellion is the most common early game trait. There are plenty of options when it comes to items, but Static Shiv has been the dominating force in the early game with Ziggs as the main user of it. With the high attack speed, Ziggs can proc Lightning of Shiv often, and with lowered magic resist on enemies, his bomb will do extra damage. It's a fantastic combo that prior to the B patch meant you could potentially shake your way to 9 if you had Ziggs 2 with a Shiv. After the nerf, it's not as likely to do that, but going to 8 with Ziggs as your carry is definitely doable. All in all, Ziggs, despite the nerfs, is still the best one-cost carry in the current meta. Let's move on to the number 9 champion on the list, Kennen. Once again, there are several 2-cost champions that are doing well in the current meta. Kennen is one of the best because of how well he holds on to Morellonomicon and Guardian Angel. With those two items, regardless of what composition you're running during the early and mid game, Kennen can win you the fight a lot of the time. This is due to the way Kennen's ability functions. At times it can be a bit finicky, but generally when he casts it, he'll end up in the enemy backline. With Morellonomicon, he's doing damage to them constantly, lowering how much they heal and stuns them briefly. The later the game goes on, the less likely this is going to win you the fight, but early on in the game, up until stage 4, Kennen can wreck most backline carries. Even though we did say Kennen can be used in any board, for the most part he's paired with Hellion. But skirmishers are rising up in the meta, and Kennen is a big reason for their success, so keep an eye out for that composition. Next up, we have another 2-cost champion, Syndra, that comes in at number 8. It's a testament to the design of set 5 that there are so many 1 and 2-cost champions that are doing well in the meta. Sure, part of it is balance, but for a champion like Syndra, she's relevant throughout the entire game even though she's just a 2-cost unit. Part of this is because of her traits. Redeemed isn't exactly dominating the meta, but it's used alongside Velkaz and occasionally Kayle. The more important trait for Syndra is Invoker. Invoker is by far the best splash trait, which increases the overall value of Syndra during the mid and late game. Her value has gone up even more after the nerfs to Ivern, as he's likely to be used less. The other reason for Syndra's continued success is her ability. Being able to toss an enemy champion in your backline is incredibly useful at preventing your main carry from getting killed. Most notably, this is going to be effective against Assassin, but based on positioning, it can help against any would-be backline killers. This ability is useful all game, which means Syndra is useful all game. Unless she's nerfed into Oblivion or Invoker falls out of favor in the meta, it's likely we'll continue to see Syndra as a staple of the meta. Since we're on the topic of Invokers, let's move on to the number 7 champion, Karma. This spot was a toss-up between Karma and Teemo. Both of them are commonly used in the meta and have Invoker as one of their traits. But Teemo is not as easy to play because he's considered a 5-cost, so finding him is difficult. Plus, when you do find him, he costs health. For some players, this is going to be alright if they've been doing well throughout the game, but for others, Teemo is not possible to use because he lowers their health too much. For those reasons, Karma comes out on top and takes our spot on the list. Of course, it's not just because of the downside to Teemo, she does plenty on her own as a carry. While she is dependent on having blue buff, with it, her ability turns into a machine gun after a few casts. And since she casts often and can hit multiple units, yeah, it's pretty obvious why she's viable. The major drawback to Karma is her ability is random, meaning you won't always hit the enemy carry, and this can cause you to lose the round. But overall, she's consistent enough and is an Invoker, which makes Karma a top-tier champion. Next up, we have Felios coming in at number 6. Felios got knocked down a few pegs by the B patch as he lost a bit of attack damage and attack speed. Without those nerfs, Felios would have easily been in our top 3. And honestly, he still may be, but it will take time for the meta to settle down again, so we're being cautious as to where Felios is going to end up. Despite the nerfs, Felios is still the premier ranged auto attack 4-cost carry. Draven is starting to have success, but Felios appears to still have the upper hand. A large reason for the success of Felios, besides its ability to do damage, is Nightbringer. Nightbringer is not only a really good trait, it also has a lot of really good champions such as Morgana, Darius, Diana, and Lee Sin. These champions are all doing a great job at providing support to Felios so he can sit back and deal damage. Another reason for Felios doing well is there's a lot of item options. Sure, he's a bit restricted because you need extra attack damage items like Deathblade and attack speed boosters like Rageblade. But thanks to shadow items, there's a lot of viable options, so you're never completely cut off from being able to play Felios if you're able to 2-star and pivot. Overall, Felios is comfortably the best ranged carry for now, but keep an eye out for Draven. Let's move on to the number 5 champion, Velkaz. With the nerfs to Mordekaiser, Felios, and LeBlanc, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of Velkaz players. And it makes sense as a lot of the compositions that got nerfed did alright into Velkaz or basically shut him down completely as a damage dealer. It's also important to note that with Ivern and Volibear being nerfed, they aren't going to be played as often, and both of them did well into Velkaz. Of course, Velkaz is not perfect. His major flaw is targeting, as sometimes he only hits a few units or gets stuck on a reviving unit from either Guardian Angel or Revenant. And positioning is incredibly important, so if you're not constantly scouting to make sure your Velkaz is in the right position, you can end up losing the fight. Despite all that, Velkaz does well as a magic damage carry. This is mostly because he does a lot of damage and there's a lot of viable item options, but another reason most players don't think about is magic resistant shred. Garen, Static Shiv, Brand, Spark, and potentially other sources all have some form of magic resistant shred. Because of that, it makes Velkaz and any magic damage champion do increased damage. It matters a lot for Velkaz because the faster targets die, the faster he'll move his laser into the next clump of units. Velkaz is definitely a top tier champion, though he does have some frustrating aspects to him. Next, we have 2 champions coming into the number 4 slot with the God Kings Darius and Garen. First off, the God King trait, where it increases the damage, is basically useless as it only increases the damage against specific traits by 20%. So don't get caught up on the you can only have one God King thing. If it makes sense for your composition to run both, then do it. As for why both of the God Kings are doing well in the meta, it's because they shred either armor or magic resistance. Darius goes hand in hand with champions like Felios, not only because of the Nightbringer trait, but due to him lowering armor with his ultimate. Garen is best to pair with any magic damage because of his ultimate. And both Darius and Garen are solid frontliners, so it's easy to fit them into most comps. Really, the only negative aspect is 2-starring them can be difficult, and the fact the God King trait doesn't have much value. We're into our top 3 with Heimerdinger coming in at the number 3 spot. Heimerdinger is by far the best 5-cost champion in the game. The reason is, even at level 1, he does a lot of damage with his baby dragon. Not only that, it can hit almost the entire enemy board when aimed properly and has healing reduction on it. Plus, the baby dragon acts like an extra unit that attacks, so you gain additional health to your board by having it. Another benefit to running Heimerdinger is he doesn't need Renewer or Draconic to be played. This means that you can toss him in at any point just to add damage and utility to your board. That said, he is an important part to Draconic compositions, as without him, it's not possible to hit 5 Draconic. All in all, when it comes to the late game, Heimerdinger is one of the best 5-cost champions to add to your board. Coming in at number 2, we have Rell. Oh, Rell, you're such a good frontline champion. Even without her traits, Rell is by far the best frontline champion because not only she stuns in an AoE around her, she also shields your units. And with proper positioning, the shield will almost always be on your main carry, which protects them against random AoE or assassins. Honestly, we could sit here and gush over Rell for a long time, so we'll keep it short by saying she's the best frontliner, so use her. And the number 1 champion for patch 11.9 is Diana. Diana is by far the most contested champion in the current meta. No, she's not a carry, but she brings insane utility to your board on her own, but even more so if you have Frozen Heart or Shadow Frozen Heart. The reason is that Frozen Heart is now applied within 2 hexes of the item holder, so on an assassin like Diana, it's almost always going to hit the enemy carry. And the Shadow version increases the slow to a whopping 50%. Now you may be thinking that Frozen Heart can be useful on any assassin. Why is it specific to Diana? Well, that's thanks to her ability that pulls units towards her. That plus Frozen Heart is going to absolutely disrupt the enemy backline. She'll interrupt casting against units like Velkaz and mess up positioning for champions that need to be cornered, like a Felios. By far, she's the most frustrating unit to play against as well as the most useful to play. No other champion currently comes close to how contested she is, as every board can do well with a Diana added to it. And that's going to be it for our top 10 champions for patch 11.9. But before we go, there's a few quick honorable mentions to cover. The first honorable mention is to the fallen heroes of the B patch, Ivern and Volibear. Both got hit hard by the nerf bat after being staple champions of the meta, but we suggest continuing to try them out as they still serve well as frontline units, so don't count them out completely despite the harsh nerfs they received. Next is Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser definitely needs to be toned down, and they successfully did, but he's still viable. Don't completely ignore playing him just because of the nerfs, though he's definitely not as strong as he once was. And our last two honorable mentions are champions to keep an eye out for. Jax has been slowly rising in popularity as a carry with skirmishers, especially after the B patch. Morgana also has increased value because she's one of the stronger frontline champions now that Ivern and Volibear are weaker. In fact, Morgana may be the best frontline option that isn't Rell or one of the God Kings, as her ability can hit a lot of units. So keep an eye out for both Morgana and Jax rising up in popularity in the meta. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. Honestly, the design team has done an amazing job with set 5. There's so many viable champions to choose from depending on the situation. With continued balance tweaking, we'll likely see set 5 become one of the best sets they've released so far. Let us know in the comment section below which champions you've had the most success with. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.